everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio. You know what? It's the fourth Saturday of the month, and that means we get to chat with Glynn Burrows. He's a family history expert. He's a tour guide and owner of Norfolk Tours in England, where he takes people where they want to go and also helps them dig up their family history and takes them to, ancestral places, which is really, really special. And today we're going to talk about the royal family. We've been talking about the royal family quite a bit this year. It was Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth's Jubilee this year. So Glynn was on, I think it was in February, talking about her. He's got articles up on blendradioandtv.com about her. On our park travel website, which is nationalparktraveling.com, you can read about what a royal tour would be like to take in England, where you take in all different members of the family history and go to castles and to just amazing places. But unfortunately, as we all know, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has passed, and is basically a royal regime change happening, and the country is still obviously in mourning. She really was an amazing, amazing woman with an incredible life, and she did so much in service. And so we're really glad to have Glynn back on. And wish it was a lighter subject, Glynn, but welcome back. How are you?
Hi, yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, it is a sad time in the country, but then again, we all have to move forward, and a new king and a new sort of regime, new ideas. Things have to change, and we all had to realize that the Queen was 96, so she's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
So it is sad, but then again, fantastic celebrations for her life and what she's done.
Yeah, and she really had I think isn't she now the longest reigning royalty?
Not in the world. No,
Not
in England or in Great Britain, she's the longest reigning monarch. She overtook Queen Victoria several years ago. But no, I believe there was somewhere some king in the, I don't know, Far East, I think it was. I can't remember. So you'll have to look it up and check my details. But he acceded to the throne when he was a very small child.
Oh,
and he lasted or he lived longer.
wow.
But I don't think he was as old as the Queen. I think it was just the fact that he acceded to his throne earlier, when he was a lot younger, because the Queen was, I think she was 25 when she became Queen.
It's amazing to hear all these different countries and places like Papua New Guinea, right? And there's these places that England still has these territories that we kind of all forget about. Like America has U.S. territories, like the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and you have national parks there because of the military history. And so, it's interesting to hear all these countries speak up about her and her life, and how she was pretty open, in regards to diversity in cultures. And
very much so. Yeah,
I mean, that's what I've heard.
The Queen of United Kingdom was also the Queen in lots of other different places. But she was also the head of state in a lot of the other countries as well. I think it was in the 50s, not in the 1950s. I think the number of countries that she's the head of state is in the 50s, the number 50s. So, she is the sort of the chief of a lot of countries. And seeing as we used to have all of the empire years ago, the remnants of the empire does spread over the entire world, and it takes in so many different cultures, religions, peoples, and ways of life. And whenever the Queen visited these different countries, she always respected the people's way of life and what they did. So if she had to wear, I don't know, a headscarf or whatever, or she had to shake hands in a particular way, she always did what the country wanted her to do, to blend in. So that was excellent, even though she was the Queen.
I remember a story. I have no idea if this is true or not, but I remember a story about her meeting Idi Amin, and he drank his soup right out of the bowl and didn't
Right.
use a spoon. And so she did the same. Is that true? Do you know that story?
I don't know whether that's true or not, but I mean, it seems that it would be the sort of thing that she would do if that was the custom of the country.
Hmm.
You know, because I
Wow.
mean, a lot of countries they don't use cutlery. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of countries use their hands to eat
Yep.
with. So I would have thought that the Queen would do whatever was acceptable in that country, because a lot of times, if you don't do what they do in these different countries, you're being very offensive.
Right.
So, you know, I think the Queen, being who she was, she would do anything that she could to make the people feel comfortable.
Mhm.
I heard a lot of women in countries, of course, you know, when we're talking about third world countries, women are still, I mean, in this country, we're still fighting for our rights, quite frankly.
Mhm.
But we won't get into that. Just kidding. We won't get into politics, right? We'll all behave. But women really looked up to her and her strength. And I think it meant a lot to see a woman persevere and, you know, quite frankly, rule in the way she, you know, she was this powerful, you know, she was a powerful figure. And I think for women, people looked up to her because she, I don't know, she didn't have this over girly kind of, she just kind of, well, they talk about her being quite, not closed off, but she's just very, she's regal, right? I mean, can we use that
Yeah.
word for a lady? Regal?
Oh, definitely. I
Mhm.
mean, the fact that she ruled our country and she commanded the respect of everybody, well, I say everybody, most people,
Mhm.
just because of how she was. I mean, she was such I don't know, just she seemed to be, like you say, such a regal person, but she was never a person who appeared unreachable.
Mm.
She was always the sort of person who would mix with the common people as well. I mean, where I originate from, a little tiny village in mid Norfolk, in Weasenham, the Queen actually had her pigeon lofts. The Queen, believe it or not, the Queen had her, or has her own racing pigeons,
Oh,
and
wow.
the Queen's racing pigeons were actually housed in Weasenham, in the village that I come from. And she used to come to the village, and she used to come and visit the man who kept her pigeons, and he worked with my dad. He was a lorry driver. You know,
Oh, wow.
he was a village bloke. His name was Alan Pearce. Everybody called him Rinso, but the Queen actually used to come to Weasenham to see Rinso,
Hmm.
as everybody knew him, and she would go into his house and meet with him, ask him how he was getting on with the pigeons, and have a cup of tea or whatever. So the
Cool.
Queen was in lots of ways one of us.
Mhm.
You know, she was in some ways the girl next door, but she was also obviously the Queen.
Mm.
And I think that the way that she carried that was magnificent,
Mm.
because, you know, she was brought up by Victorian people. You know, the people who
Mhm.
brought her up, you know, her mum and her dad were actually born in the Victorian era. And the way that she was brought up, the royal family were very aloof and very detached.
Mhm.
But during the Queen's long reign, actually the royal family became much more approachable. And
Hmm.
I think that is one of the biggest things that most of us realize about the Queen, is that actually she was one of the first people to do walkabouts. You know, she was one of the first monarchs to actually be out and about with her people, you know. So
I
it
think
was,
I,
that is, she had a
yeah,
good balance of it where,
she's warm. She has warmth.
yeah,
Yeah,
she had
I
a balance
saw,
of still
yeah,
keeping her royalty, you know, and not, you know, I
yeah,
was gonna, yeah, that's a balance of being able to do that to,
without
I don't
being,
want to say, yeah, mix with the commoners, you know, that's just
yeah,
right there
that's
on my
yes,
funny.
tongue. I'm just gonna say
But
it, but it's true, right? When you think
yes,
about it. And I think what's something so interesting about her passing and her jubilee is that in your article, and everyone, Glynn's got an article, God Save the King, which we want to really get into about this, the whole change with this. But one thing I've noticed is the conversation of whether, people like the royal family system, right? Because it's a way of part rule, right? But it's not really politics, but it's like this other way of life. And so a lot of people in your article, you touch on that. How many people, do they pay attention to the royal family and what's going on with the royals? Some people view them like celebrity gossip, right? But at the same time, it's like people are, no matter what your belief in is that they respect the queen and her legacy, so that's a very interesting thing. So what's it like in England now? I mean,
Well,
how are people feeling about having a royal family? Is there any ruffled feathers kind of thing, or?
yeah, I mean, we are seeing some people who are coming out of the woodwork and saying, why are we doing all of this for some old woman who's just died?
Oh,
But yeah,
Wow.
we're getting it,
Big.
obviously.
Wow.
But we're also getting a lot more people who I would never have imagined would be interested, who are interested. I mean, I heard on the news this afternoon that the queue to see or to walk by the Queen's body in Westminster Hall is now 5 miles long.
Oh, wow.
Now, I know the English are very well known for queuing up, or I think you call it standing in line.
Yeah.
But can you imagine standing in line
Wow.
for 5 miles?
Oh, wow.
And
Uh-uh.
there are an allowance. There is allowances for it to get to 11 miles long within London,
Wow.
because they are expecting more people to come. And when
Wow.
you consider that she's going to be laying in state until Monday morning, there is going to be time for people to go and see her. But when you consider that people are willing to stand in line for 5 miles and
Wow.
more just to walk by her coffin, it does seem to let you realize that there are a lot of people who want to pay their respects to her. And that is without the people who are leaving flowers at all of the big palaces, like up at Balmoral itself, at Sandringham, Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace. They've all got masses of flowers. I mean, my wife and I, my daughter and her family went up to Sandringham this weekend, and my granddaughter just laid a little card that she had made. She's only 3.5, but she drew a picture of her and her sister and the Queen. And she said, I said to her, how did you think about that? What made you do that? And she said, well, I heard that the Queen died and it was quite sad. So she just wanted to take her a card, which was lovely. But my wife and I went on Tuesday, and it's amazing to see the thousands of bouquets that are laying there. And you'll see in my pictures, the bouquets of flowers that are just laid there for the Queen. So it's just,
wow, the florists must be going nuts. I mean, you've got to think about it,
Yes, they are. But there are also a lot of people. A very good friend of mine actually posted a picture of the bouquet that she had put together from flowers out of her garden. And a lot of people are doing that. Because
cool.
that is
amazing.
Really personal, isn't it?
When we had the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, a few months back, and it's really sad. I mean, when children and teachers are lost to that kind of violence. And now the kids are going back to school this week, and I think that's got to be so difficult and scary for kids to go back to a school where there was a shooting, and for parents to, I mean, it's just a really, there's extra security set up and everything, but when this happened, and obviously then all the processing and the criminal investigations, all of that's going on, but then it was time to lay the children to rest and the teachers who had passed, and the florists got together. I mean, because it was, suddenly, I mean, this is a tiny town outside of Austin, but it's small, florists got together in the region to help each other and to find out what flowers and colors those who had passed really loved,
Right.
so that they could, oh, I'm going to cry. That's like
Mhm.
just so sad when you think about the flowers, these personal,
Mm.
they wanted it to be like, if, you know, the little girl loves forget-me-nots or loved, you know, the color blue, that they, all these florists just worked together, showed up on each other's doorsteps to help, not asking pay or anything, and brought whatever they had and supplies to do this. And I think
Yeah.
that is, you know, when we have these kind of negative and sad things happen, it's often when we see the better side of humanity,
Mhm.
Yes.
you know?
Yes. And I think, like you say, it's always these times when we do see what people are really like. You know, we're always seeing the negative side of life, and we're always
Right.
hearing about the negative side of life. But actually, there is an amazing amount of care in the society today. Even, you know, even today in the dog eat dog world that we live in, there are a lot of people who still care for everybody else.
Yep.
And that is the sort of thing that brings it out. The sad thing is that next week it will be all over and everyone will have forgotten, you know.
Yeah,
And
until the
we
next
until
happening.
until the
Yeah.
next time. But you know, it's something like what happened with COVID, you know, when all the neighbors sort of got together and went and done the shopping for people who couldn't get out and done things like that. But we seem to return back to normal very, very quickly. And
Mhm.
that's quite sad that we don't stay like we were.
Maybe that's why
Mhm.
we have to have negative things happen to remind us to go back that, you know, positive way. It's kind of weird. You know, we always talk about that, you know, when it
Mm,
gets to religion and spiritual beliefs, it's like, well, if there was a God, why do we have starving children in Africa kind of thing, right? Well,
mm.
Mhm.
maybe it's to not let us get too
Ma-
comfortable on our laurels and not care. Maybe we have to, as the way human beings are, have to have that little poke to
But
remind
do
us to be
something
that way.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pity that we have to have that, but apparently we do. Not all people do need that, but apparently a lot do. And
Yeah.
but I you know, her legacy, the Queen, yeah, it is, and so many stories and so many photos, and a lot of it, you know,
Mhm.
there's photos of her riding a motorcycle and fixing a tire, and I'm like, dude, you go, girl, she did it, you know. So you
Yeah.
got to think she just really has, you know, all these stories, and I think for women, um, just to, she was an empowering woman to, like you're saying, be able to deal with, you know, common folk, you know, regular people that are outside of the royal family and yet still have that royalty. And so that's a very, and I think her mother, the Queen mother, had that too. That you know, she had that twinkle.
She
Nancy, you always you love the Queen mother, Nancy. She reminds
Yeah.
you of Nana, right?
Yeah. They
Yeah,
look
I mean, the
almost.
Queen Mother was a little bit more elite than the Queen. But
Mhm.
then again, you know, you're talking about another generation. She was born in 1900, you know, so you
Mhm.
are talking about a Victorian person.
Right.
You know, and she was a little bit more, I don't know what the right word would be, but you know, she was a bit more stuffy than the Queen, it
But she did have
seems.
a naughty little twinkle in her eye once
Yeah.
Oh,
in a
she
while.
did, yeah, and she did
Yeah.
like a glass of gin, I think, or Dubonnet or
See,
You
whatever it
go,
was.
girl.
that's
There you
it.
go. Yeah,
But
that's
you
I
know,
right.
it is always interesting to remember that these people are real people as well. You know,
Mhm.
the thing that we all have to realize is that the king today lost his mum last week.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
know, that is what I think we all need to remember. And you know, Princess Anne, God bless her. I mean, she has stayed with her mum the entire way, all the way from Scotland, right the way back to Buckingham Palace. She accompanied the
Mhm.
Queen's coffin, all the way from Balmoral to Buckingham Palace. Now,
Wow.
you know, she she's a real, I don't know, a stalwart, I think is the right word for
Mhm.
the royal family. You know, she's one of the most hardworking members of the royal family. And, you know, what she's done, I think, is really commendable, especially when you consider that, you know, she's just lost her mum. You know,
Mhm.
that's a big thing for anybody.
Yeah.
But I think what we were talking about a little while ago about the changes, and I think from what I can gain from what I've heard in different sources, is that the royal family is going to be sort of pared down a little bit. I don't think there's going to be so many, as we sometimes call them, hangers-on, as there have been. You know, I think there's going to be a core of working royals, and then the other ones are going to have to get on with it, because up until now the royal family has been rather large, and I think that one of the things that the present king is going to do is he's going to make sure that there are less people who are on the list, i.e. gaining money from the state, and those people are going to have to work a bit harder. I think that might be on the cards. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It's early days.
It's
That's interesting,
interesting.
though.
Yeah, I mean, you've got so many changes, but it's like, the postage stamps and
Oh, yeah.
all those kind of things. That's kind of like, and passports, that's like crazy. You're
What,
talking about
the
passports. I'm like,
passports,
wow.
Yeah.
I
the
mean,
money?
how does that happen? Do
Yeah.
you get charged for a new passport? I
Oh,
mean,
no. It just means that when you renew your
oh,
passport, you
okay.
will get one with C3R on it instead of E2R.
So
And
does
that's the
money
same.
okay.
become more important? Like, because you've got a, coin with a queen on it, does that become more valuable?
No, there's been millions of them minted. So, obviously people will keep coins from 2022 because they're the last ones, but I don't think they're going to be valuable because there's millions of them minted. But I think
Okay.
people will always do that. People will always collect the newspaper that announced her death. People will always do these things because, funnily enough, my grandmother kept the souvenir special newspaper from the coronation. So I've got that upstairs.
Yeah,
in
that's cool,
my tin trunk that my grandmother
Yeah.
gave me. So
So-
I've kept newspapers, and they will go along with my old newspapers.
Yeah, and that's part of history, so it's important to keep some of these things. Will they collect all the money? And because I read somewhere, I'm like, really? I understand when you print new money, bills that, now King Charles will be on there.
Yeah.
But do they take the old money back and exchange it?
No, they will.
Okay, 'cause the one-
they will take it in when it gets bad, when it gets past its sell-by date, so to speak. But this is something that I was actually talking to somebody about today. There are very few people around who remember the king, as I said in my article about the Platinum Jubilee. You have to be in your late 70s to remember the king.
Yeah.
But I'm lucky enough to remember having the old coins in my change when I was a kid, because before 1971 we still used the old coinage system. So I was still in my change getting coins with Queen Victoria's head on.
Wow.
Because it was still legal tender.
Yeah,
So-
we had those too. When we were in England, I swear we
Yeah.
had those.
Yeah, the old pennies and
Yeah.
halfpennies and things like that, we were still getting them. But what will happen is that when they get badly corroded or whatever, they will then get taken out of circulation. And banknotes don't last very long anyway. Even the new plastic ones don't last very
No,
long.
you know what? Banknotes never last very long around us.
No, but we've got new plastic ones at the moment, and I think they are
Plastic?
supposed to last. Yeah, they're supposed to last a bit longer, but they're not very nice. I don't like them.
That's
They haven't
weird.
got the feeling
Plastic. That's weird.
Yeah.
That's the thing I loved about
Huh.
England, and South Africa and Kenya. When we got to this country, I couldn't understand the money because it was all one color, all one shape and size. And I remember in England that the money was different sizes, different colors, even
Yeah.
the coins. Like there was the one, and it was like a hexagon and with a hole in the middle, and I think it had like hands all around it or something.
Oh,
No. They didn't have a hole in the middle, but it had hands around it. That was a 50 pence piece,
Okay.
and
I wonder
that was
what-
to celebrate us joining the EU.
Oh,
We've
well,
come out-
now,
we've
oh,
come out
hello.
of it. we've come out of that now, so you're not
Yeah,
allowed to
really.
talk about it.
That's changed a little. So that's,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's fascinating about the money and the changes. One thing I do want to touch, I know this is airing after the Queen's burial, but this
Yes.
is a big funeral that hasn't, they were saying that it's not, it's like a state funeral that
Yes.
hasn't happened since Winston Churchill.
That's about right. Yeah, I mean, 1965 was when Winston Churchill died, and that was a very, very big state funeral. I mean, I don't remember it because I was only 6 at the time, but I remember it being on the telly, but I don't actually remember it. If you know, I remember Winston
Yeah.
Churchill dying, but I don't remember much about it. But the things that I've seen about it, you know, it is a very, very big affair. You know,
Mhm.
even the taking the Queen from Buckingham Palace to the Palace of Westminster, or the Westminster Hall, was a massive escapade. I don't know if you saw it in America, but you know, there's all these soldiers, and her coffin was on a gun carriage,
Mhm.
and you know, the 4 children all walked from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall, along with William and Harry and Peter Phillips. They were the Queen's 3 grandsons.
And she's going to be
Wow.
buried next to Prince Philip, right? Or they're
Yes,
moving his body
at
to her.
Windsor. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to
Wow.
be at Windsor, the actual committal. But
Mhm.
she's going to have 2 services, well, probably 3, I think. There's going to be the one at Westminster Abbey, which is the main public one. Then there's another one at St George's Hall at Windsor when she gets there. And then I think the committal is a private family affair, which, you know, it should be.
Mhm.
Wow.
Wow.
It's such a, it's to me, how
Mhm.
do you know, to live your life in the public eye when it's such a personal time, it's just so difficult. And I know that,
Yeah.
you know, everyone's raised and understand to do it, but that would be so hard to have happen, you know, if
Yes.
you passed away or any kind of anything happens, it hits the tabloids, you know. So I think that's the other thing about this, you know, is you're in the public eye, you're born into it, you know, whether you like it or not,
Yes,
you're in.
and also, you know, it is difficult. I mean, I remember we saw a couple of shots of some of the younger royals,
Mhm.
and they were visibly moved, you know, and I think one of them was in tears. But you know, they've just lost their grandmother. You know,
Mhm.
what do we expect? You know,
Well, of course.
why do we expect the royals not to have emotion? You know,
Mm.
why
think-
shouldn't they
it's-
be allowed to?
It's that saying, stiff upper lip. Is
Yeah,
that yeah, it's that. Is it?
but you know, it's not normal, is it? You know, it's not natural.
No.
You know,
No, it's
I
not
know
natural.
normal is not a word that's acceptable nowadays, but you know, if they want to shed a tear, then let them shed a tear. Let's not
Yeah.
have that picture all over the front pages of a newspaper just because somebody has shed a tear in public. You know,
Yeah.
but that is what the media always seems to make of it. You know, it's
Mm.
just people being normal, and
Yeah.
let us allow them to be normal. That's what I think.
Yeah, because if you didn't, okay, you would be shocked if nobody sheds a tear for the Queen, then you would think there's something wrong with them.
Yeah,
You know, so no matter what they do, somebody's going to make a comment one way or the other, and
Right.
all, you know, when you see the media in force, with all the flash bulbs going off and all that, it seems so invasive.
yes. And this,
You know,
like I said, you know, this is their private time. This is their mother, their grandmother. You know,
Mhm.
and I think that is something that we, as general public, need to realize, that actually we are invading. Sometimes we're invading their privacy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That is the price they have to pay.
Mhm.
And for most of us, I think that is a price just that we wouldn't be willing to pay. You know,
Mhm. I agree. Yeah, it's wow. I just,
I
you
mean,
know,
only
just have respect.
people who look good when they cry are actors and actresses because they've taught themselves how to look good when they cry.
is that right?
Because people are normal people, average people who are not actors and actresses, I'm trying to get the right words here, you don't look all that good when you cry. And if you're
Yeah, we have
really,
ugly faces.
Well,
grief
so be it.
stricken, yeah, and nobody really, unless they're practiced, nobody really looks good when they cry,
Mm-mm.
Well,
you know?
Well, I just, to me, it's a natural part of life, and what I also, is you've got to think about her dogs, her corgis.
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
They
that,
lost their mommy. I mean, that
yeah.
animals mourn too. I
Oh,
know
of
that for a
course.
fact. We've seen it. We know it. They must be wondering where she is. I know that.
Mhm.
I think Sarah Ferguson took him, and was it
Yeah,
Andrew?
I know that some have gone with Prince Andrew and
Yeah,
Eugenie, um, but I don't. Obviously they will be looked after by members of staff anyway. But
yeah,
yes, I mean the Queen was very close to her animals, so no doubt some of her animals were very close to her as well.
yeah,
Of course.
yeah. I love corgis. They've got
Oh,
such crazy little characters. I remember when we lived in England.
Jasper, the
Yeah,
carrot.
a step aunt of mine, she had Jasper. Yeah, the corgi wasn't called Jasper, but
No, the
the
carrot was.
corgi would always go, if you go get Jasper Carrot, and this corgi and the carrot, like that was the toy. And if they used the washing machine, this corgi went berserk and would
Yeah.
attack the washing machine and go around. I mean, it's crazy. It was so that was like, I think the first corgis I ever saw were in England. I mean, it was yeah, the royal dog, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was interesting because you always think about the English bulldog, right? But
Yes, yeah, but the
corgis,
Queen has always had corgis.
yeah, I love English bulldogs too. I mean, we love them all, don't we? We pets it across the country. We gotta love them.
You just have
But
to, yeah.
Glenn, so now the king, it'll be God Save the King. I know you said that on Facebook, like, the day after, and I went, what? I'm like, what are you saying, Glenn? And
Yeah.
it just was odd that's odd, like to hear
Yes. Well, I
like
mean,
that fast.
like I said, several times already today, and in that previous interview about the Platinum Jubilee,
Yeah.
you have to be over 75 to remember
Mm.
singing the national anthem with the word king in it.
Mm.
Because
Wow.
we have all been brought up saying the Queen,
The
God
Queen.
save the Queen,
Mhm.
always has
Yeah.
been. And it is a massive sort of mind leap, I think, if you could say it like that, to suddenly realize that we haven't got the Queen anymore. We've now
Yeah.
got
Mhm.
a king. And
Yeah.
I've never lived with a king ever.
Mm.
I've never had a king,
Mm.
so this is a first for me. And I'm 63, and I've never ever lived in a time when there was a king of England.
Wow.
Well,
It's amazing.
I
Yeah.
got a friend said to me, she's from Scotland, and she messaged me, and of course everybody we know that's connected to England, we're like, "Oh, we're so sorry," and she went and she comes back and she goes, "Oh man, it's just going to be men from now on. There's no woman with a possible future of England." And I'm like, well, you never know. You know what I mean? You never know what could happen. But
No.
she was kind of like, oh gosh, do we have to have a male ruler after all these years? And I'm like, yeah, you do. But I mean, that really is the foreseeable future, right? Because, and you were saying in your article, these plans, and like all of a sudden everything started going into place.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, wow, that's really fast. To me, it'd be
Yeah.
like,
That's
if something happened to Nancy or vice versa, we have things in place, but I think we'd be just crying, you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
what
I
I
mean,
mean?
everything goes into place straight away. There is already a plan for if anything, God forbid, happened to the king.
Mm.
There's already a plan in place. So
What is
that
this unicorn thing?
What?
a unicorn, that was another one. I think that was if she had died in Sandringham. I think it was.
Oh, okay. So Operation London Bridge, Operation Unicorn, because that's what
Mm.
I thought. My friend was
Oh no,
just, doing
that
something
was
about unicorns. I didn't know she was the real deal.
Operation Unicorn was she died in Scotland, but there was a plan in place with another name if she had died in Sandringham.
Oh, I
Wow.
see.
So they Operation London Bridge is the death of the Queen, and
Mhm.
Okay.
there are plans already in place about the announcements and the plans about the funeral. All of that is already planned out. But Operation Unicorn had to be taken into account because she died in Scotland. So the fact that she went to Holyrood House and then she went to St Giles's Cathedral was already in the plan. It was already in Plan Unicorn, because
Wow.
that had already been in place, and everything is already in place for, you know, anything else that's going to happen, you know. And as you just said, you know, the foreseeable future, we have got, you know, Charles, and if and when anything happens to him, we should have William, and then we should have George. But I'm of the opinion that probably William and Catherine will rule together, very much together, because I think they are a really good team. So, you know, we don't know when this is going to happen, obviously, and we can't sort of think about that when this has only just happened.
Right.
But, you know, I think that the way things are moving forward, I think the royal family has got a lot less stuffy since the Queen took over, and I think it's going to continue along that line. And by the time William takes over, it will be much less stuffy, and I think they will probably rule together, a bit like William and Mary did. We had a king and queen who were equals in the late 17th century. William and Mary, they were I think they were cousins who married.
Ooh.
And they both had an equal claim to the throne of England, so they ruled together as William and Mary.
I
And
like
think-
that.
and
I like
yeah,
that
sure.
idea.
And
Well,
I
I think
think
that they're doing a
that's
good
right.
job too already for wildlife, and you know,
Well, yeah, I mean,
having-
he was doing it before it became fashionable.
yes, very pro, and Harry too. You know, and just everybody just leave him alone. Who cares what Harry and Meghan want to do, and you know, Kate and Will, if they, you know, to me, they, you know, all these tabloid things, who's doing what and where. It's like, oh, you know, it just William has done so much for wildlife, anti-poaching. They're also good for what's happening in regards to the environment.
Yeah,
I think they are going to bring some positive, and I think it's going to happen now while, oh my gosh, King Charles, I have to say King Charles now,
yeah,
is king. I think William's going to be kind of his right-hand man in a way.
I think so as well. I mean, he's now the Prince of Wales, and I think that he will now step up and do a lot more. And you know, I think that that's good, because you know, we need people to be visible, and we need people who are, I should say, normal. You know what I mean? I mean, for instance, Prince William and Kate actually came to Sandringham today to look at the flowers and to talk to people. You know, that's lovely. They're actually coming to meet the normal people, you know, which is something that would not have happened before the Queen took over. You know, very, very rarely did you see the King, you know, George VI and the Queen out talking to members of the public. I know they did during the war, but generally speaking, they didn't mix with the riffraff, you know.
The
But
commoners.
now, yeah, the common people.
We're back
Now
to that again.
It's getting much more common. I mean, when the King came down from Scotland and came to Buckingham Palace, he got the driver to pull up outside the gate, and he got out and spoke to the crowds.
Oh, that's
you know?
nice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he didn't need to do that, and he was still very much in mourning and in shock about his mum dying. But he did that, and he met the crowds out there, and he spent a long time talking to the crowds, which is you know, it's a lovely thing to do.
I think that's, you know, because you have to kind of bridge that gap too. Like, you're the new person in town, and you know, people are going to go, oh, not him, and then some will be all pro him. I mean, there's just all of that, you know. So I think you have to have that it's it is political in a way, like politicians have to go and kiss babies, and listen, I would never let a politician kiss my baby.
No, me
I'm
either.
just saying,
No,
ew.
it's
You know
gross.
where they've been.
It's
Um,
gross.
but you know what I mean? It's like if you don't, it's connective. I mean, right now I know we're doing this as an audio interview just over circumstance, but it's like having a conversation where we can see each other is far better. And so that
Yes.
that human touch is really an important thing. This sounds weird, but I don't think it is. I think that it really opened a global eye to who the Queen was in the royal family and England. And I think a lot of people are going to, like, I know, as you take people around England, I bet you more and more people are going to want to go to Sandringham, Buckingham Palace, now that they know a little bit more about the Queen. I think it's kind of got people to understand. And then when the royal family now is a little bit more approachable, right? It's not saying that you're going to go meet, the king and
No.
so forth, but I think it's people are curious. And so I think people going to England are going to add some royal stops more than they may have in the past.
Yeah. I mean, it is just nice to be where they are. I know it sounds a little bit sort of cliche, but it is good to go to Sandringham to see where they spend Christmas, and just to have a wander around their private home. And this, like I said, this last week when we went to the Norwich gates at Sandringham, and to see all the flowers, it does sort of bring it home to you how much people think about them as normal people, and you would take a bunch of flowers to somebody, wouldn't you? It's the sort of thing that people do. And it is nice for visitors to actually get close up and personal to the royal family, which they can. I mean, if people come over to England during the sort of December through to February time, if they carry on with the same thing as the Queen always did, the Queen goes to church. The Queen went to church every Sunday at Sandringham, and as a member of the public, we could go there and watch her walk up to the church, which is what we did. I've done that. This was when Diana was still alive, and we stood just outside the church, and they walked just in front of me on the path there. So they are accessible, and that's nice.
Well, they have to be to a certain extent if they're going to represent.
Yes.
I mean, they do represent your country. So, I mean, yeah, you don't want somebody that it's so like removed
It won't
from
work.
the population that they don't. How do you handle day-to-day affairs about a country full of people if you don't know any of the people?
Yes.
You don't.
I mean,
you have to be human. You have to care.
It is.
And I
is
think
very, very evident that the Queen was one of the first members of the royal family who had actually worked alongside normal people. Prince Charles really hasn't done so much of that, but William has done loads of working with normal everyday folk. I mean, he used to pilot the emergency air ambulance helicopter in this area. So and he was in the forces. So he knows exactly what it's like to live in the country and be one of the lads.
Harry too.
Well, yes,
Harry,
and Harry. But what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that William is likely to be king.
yeah.
So as a king, I'm thinking that William, if he does get to be king, will be one of the first kings of England who has actually lived like the subjects, which is something that hasn't happened.
I think that is cool. I have to go back to this, Glenn. Why Operation Unicorn? I mean, what? And this, I also want to touch on the fact that she was in Scotland, and I know that's the family home, but
Yeah.
that does show more unity between Scotland, Wales, England, right, than what we may think, right? Right now, with everything that's changing, with not being part of the EU and all of that stuff, and people, I don't know, I hear all kinds of political stuff on it. I'm like, can't people just get along at this point?
Yeah, it would be nice.
But
The
yeah,
word
there seems
unicorn.
unity with that.
Yeah. I mean, the word unicorn is just a name that they gave to a plan. That's it didn't have any meaning apart from a word that they used. And the fact that she was in Scotland is where she spends most of her summers. So I think they normally went up to Balmoral in July and spent sort of July, August, and some of September in Balmoral. So that was the regular thing for them in the summertime. But they've only got homes that they use regularly in England and Scotland. They haven't got a home they use regularly in Wales, and they haven't got a home they regularly use in Northern Ireland. Although they've got places they can go to, but they haven't got Balmoral and Sandringham and Windsor.
Northern Ireland, that would be a little
So,
different.
but-
That's a
I was just looking up unicorns, and the unicorn is Scotland's national animal.
oh,
Well, it's
Yeah,
on there. It's
way.
on the royal. It's on the
Yeah.
royal coat of arms. So that could
Really?
well be why they called it.
Maybe
unicorn.
that's why. Yeah.
Yeah. It's on the
Oh,
royal
that's-
coat of arms.
what's up with Scotland?
Cool.
They've got the Loch Ness, they've got a
Cool.
unicorn.
Yeah.
I think Glynn, you need to start doing tours in Scotland. I want to go.
Well, I have taken people up to Edinburgh, but
Oh, good.
there are people who do tours of Scotland, and it is quite specialist up in Scotland. So probably I would recommend that if someone was just going
Yeah.
to do Scotland, they got someone who was based in Scotland.
Mm.
But I don't mind taking people up to Scotland on a general tour if they want to go into Scotland. But like I say, if you want to just go to Scotland, then I would suggest you got a tour guide from Scotland.
Yeah,
So-
because a lot of people go to England and Scotland and Wales.
Yeah,
It's just their
if you're
big
gonna
trip.
go
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the way,
Like I say,
yeah.
I'll be quite happy to do a general tour, but if you want specialist touring in Scotland, then the best people to get to do that are people who live in Scotland. Like I'm the best person to do a tour of Norfolk because I live in Norfolk.
Right.
I know Norfolk like the back of my hand.
Right.
Likewise, if you want to have a really detailed tour of Scotland, you need to have someone who actually knows Scotland like the
Yeah,
back
and you
of
guys work together too, which is
Mm.
cool. And
well, that's
that's
what
the
it's
thing.
about.
yeah, work together and create the best, experience for people. When
Well,
people
exactly.
go
That's-
to England and then maybe go into Scotland after seeing you, or come to you after going to Scotland, are
Yes, I
there
mean,
like,
Yeah,
is it
I mean,
is it easy to go in and out of the country? Like, I mean, here we have to have a passport. Well, we can have a mini passport thing to get into
no, there's
Canada.
there's no border. There's no borders
Oh.
in England, Scotland, Wales, no, nothing at all. And Northern Ireland, we don't need anything.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it says here that I'm all stuck on the unicorn now, that it made its first appearance in Scotland, placed on the royal coat of arms by William I, known as William the Lion.
Oh
How
yeah.
about that?
Of Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, because William I of England was William the Conqueror.
Well, this
that's
is
right,
William.
that's right.
This is William the Lion. But then why didn't they call him William the Unicorn?
Well, because
Man.
he probably was a lion. But
Yeah.
the English and the Scottish throne were separate until 1603, when James I of England was also James VI of Scotland, and he combined the two, England and Scotland. So before 1603, Scotland had their own king.
Yeah.
Wow. You know
Wow.
what? This
Crazy.
reminds me of when I was a little girl in England, and
Yeah.
I had a history book of England, the history of England, and it had there was a whole section just on royalty, right? And it just, I think even the cover had like this inside thing with all the different kings and queens and princes, and I mean it was just all these paintings one after the other of who these people were, and it was like it was overwhelming. I mean, when
Yes.
you think of how many, and then when we go to the castles, I love that book because I think we went to all the castles and I could identify them and learn about. That book was cool, man. It's just, certain history books are neat, and if you go to the places, then you can
Yes.
read up on them and kind of. I had this massive postcard collection, and of just like every king and queen and everything, from going to the castles and going in the dungeons. The dungeons freaked me out because you could
Oh,
see
they're
where the
good.
prisoners had like marked on the walls, and then they had the guillotines, like, oh my gosh, But yeah, the royalty, that you're just taking me back right now to, you had to remember who was what and where and how and when. And
Yes.
now we have Google, but it's true. You can get them all confused. But unicorns, now I just want to have some cake, because for some reason unicorns and birthday cake go hand in hand. Yeah, it just does. But Glynn, always a pleasure having you on the show. As usual, every fourth Saturday, Glynn is here, everyone. But again, it is a celebration of life for the Queen. We
Yes.
should look at
Mhm.
it that way when we look at flowers and hey,
Absolutely.
cake. You know, let's have a celebration and think of her and all all these stories. I think we're going to be talking about her for the rest of the year and looking at her life.
And
And
some. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, the Queen is definitely a subject that can go on and on and on. I mean, she had, not only did she have a long life, she had a very full life, and she had a life that touched so many people. So I think there is going to be a lot more written about her before
Mhm.
the
I'm
decade is
sure.
out.
I'm
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everyone, Glynn's articles are up on blendradioandtv.com, also nationalparktraveling.com. Just type in Glynn, Glynn, and you'll find them. And of course, you got to keep up with Glynn. If you're going to England, you must contact Glynn and then let us
Absolutely.
know, like, did he behave? If
Yeah.
you're going to go to England, he's going to be
Nicely.
the best person. You know what? It's like, to me, if you're going to go through Heathrow, you got to have a friendly face at the end of that. I'm serious.
Definitely.
Like, if you go through big airports, you want a friendly face. And that's exactly who he is, to greet you. And so go to his website, norfolk-tours.co.uk. And of course, keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Glynn's every fourth Saturday. Thank you so much, Glynn, and we'll be chatting with you again soon. Next time it's going to be what? Ghosts and Legends of England.
Oh,
Cool.
yeah. The
Woohoo!
ghosts and legends, and I'm looking forward to the sausages as well.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
we're doing Sausage Day on October 1st, everyone. Special show, and Glynn will be on there talking about English sausage. All right, I'm going to stop at that before I get the giggles. All right, thanks, Glynn.
Bye.
Bye-bye.